Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Well, it's 3:40 in the morning. I'm still awake. And you know what real men do in the mornings? They do the news. This case is not really the news. And let me check my sound before I plow into this. It's something that I'm bothered by. Kind of ish. Let me explain what I mean. And I usually bitch to my wife about this, but I'm not going to bitch to my wife about it because she's in their sleep, so I'll somewhat bitch to you, but I'm going to make my point. I'm not, I never consider myself anything, meaning capitalist, socialist, you know, anarchist, whatever. I'm a humanist. I look at stuff and think, what's the best way to do it? I don't care about the ism, and I don't necessarily want to fit myself into a particular ism because I'll get people have a tendency to need to defend the ism when they attach themselves to it. That said, I understand or would use the lens of various systems to try to, I guess, tackle other systems or to get a better idea on the arguments against or for a particular system. One of the craziest and the looniest arguments that I hear, it never fails. You'll always hear it, particularly on these capitalist channels, is that capitalism is somehow synonymous with freedom. I've heard people even make the case saying you don't even need democracy, you just need capitalism. Now, those people would say that because democracy runs to some degree in contrast, or at the very least runs directly into capitalism. They don't necessarily sit evenly beside one another. Now, the argument that you tend to hear about this is, you know, let's say Bob, or let's say Paco, let's be racist. Paco makes the decision to pick lemons. Paco decides he finds a few lemons. He's dirt poor in Arizona. And he finds a few lemons, and assuming that one of Trump's agents don't deport him, using those lemons, he makes lemonade. He gives it to somebody who's coming by for a nickel. And he finds that, oh my God, there's a lot of people here. So he makes more and more lemonade. Now, he gets to the point where he realizes he's doing pretty good and he's no longer sleeping on the streets. Paco now has a house. And with this house and with the revenue that he's bulging from this kind of lemonade stand business that he's at this point spread out through the city, he needs to get more lemons. So Paco sails to Guatemala in South America and he finds a bunch of lemons in these places. I'm not being specific with this, I'm just making this shit up. And he buys a lemon plant, an area. Now, his lemonade stand starts to get much better and he starts to get a much bigger area and he starts to spread out through the United States. And he starts to buy more land in that particular area of the globe. Now, at this point, he's doing gangbusters. He has lemonade stands all across America. He has areas and plots of land that he's purchased in South America and Guatemala. And those people now have jobs, and the people who are working under him now have jobs. And he's like a millionaire and billionaire, and he's given to some church. And it's like Paco lived the American dream. He started plucking lemons, and now he's a job creator, and he's a capitalist. And he's made himself a self-made man. Isn't it great? Now, Wealth of Nations will kind of make the point that this, to some degree, needs to be regulated. People like to use the invisible hand comment without necessarily reading what else was said about the whole social fabric and all this other stuff. But whatever. Paco is the capitalist. Now, we always look at this only from the perspective of the capitalist, the guy who does this. But we never necessarily look at the perspective down ballot. He's creating jobs. Great. What does it mean, though, for him to create jobs? I mean, ultimately, there are people who are working under him. Those people who are working under him are not capitalists. They're working for somebody. They're coming into a company, punching a clock, and for X amount of time doing something that they don't want to do for somebody who they probably don't want to necessarily do it for, and that there will be a surplus amount of their labor that is going to go to him, to Paco. to the capitalists. He's going to extract a certain amount of funds for them doing an inane job that they didn't want to do in the first place. Go down ballot further to places like Guatemala in South America. Paco has bought up a bunch of land, and he's decided to pay people at a dirt rate. And Paco, because he's a good capitalist, has also started to influence the governmental affairs in those nations. Say, for example, like, because he has political clout in the United States, preventing certain people from coming to power. So Paco has been putting dictators, or working with the United States government to put dictators in Guatemala, Chile, and some of the other countries in order to prevent certain workers' rights and workers' legislation, because if their wages go up, Paco will make less. I'm making the point to you that the story that we're told about the capitalists is often only told from the 1%. What about the 99%? The 99% are forced in many respects, just based on the things that they need to work inane jobs. One job, working for a burger joint, working for some other joint. Many of the jobs that they don't necessarily want to do, but they're somewhat compelled to do based on their needs, because the society itself doesn't provide the basic needs. This is not a recipe for freedom. This is the opposite. Ultimately, you've created wage slaves, and many of which, 50% of which, are either poor or working a low-wage job, running on a hamster wheel, trying to make ends meet, borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, going in massive amounts of debt if they want to get an education, and God forbid if they get sick. Oh, God forbid. That's not freedom. That's something else. This is a story told from the perspective of the capitalists. For the other 99%, those people are working. They're wage slaves for all intents and purposes. You've went from the feudal lord to the serf, from the slave to the master, to essentially creating an entire system by which all of these people voluntarily, to some degree, I mean, I don't know if necessarily you can call being forced to compel by your needs to be voluntarily, but choosing a plantation. But they still need to choose a plantation. And they will work that plantation for a period of time. Mind you, even working jobs that don't necessarily have the best social benefit, they work those jobs because they need to work those jobs, because if they don't, they're going to die hungry, poor, and in the street with no pants on, begging for cash. All of those things. My point is, this is not a recipe for freedom. This is something else. Freedom, at the very least, would have a prerequisite to have your needs met. How can you be free? Free. How can you be a free person if you don't, at the very least, have the basics of your humanity furnished? I'm just saying, this narrative, that the capitalist thing, it's nonsense. It's nonsense downstream when you get to the way they make their profits, all the resources pushing down. Look, I would say, look at South America and the things that we've done to South America with pursuit of the capitalists in order to keep that class in a certain advantage. And yes, I understand some of this had to do with political clout being expressed in the political space, but so what? It's still the same thing. At the point where you have this massive concentration of cash, and that massive concentration of cash, of course, is going to seek to enhance, to get more cash, which naturally just ends up with this idea of laws and policy, so forth, especially when you get into South America, where that money can drown out or buy political opponents or political favors. I'm going to end it here. I don't want this to be long. I watched, we were at lunch today with my grandmother, and I watched these people walk around in the restaurant with shirts on saying, "I love my job." The capitalists made those people wear shirts saying, "I love my job." I thought, how demoralizing that they're forcing them to debase themselves in this way. Those people may absolutely hate their job. They're on their feet all this time. They're not getting paid a huge amount. And they're doing it all for somebody else to essentially reap the profits of their labor. Their labor essentially being not necessarily prized. Being used. And being stuck with the capitalists, subsuming their opinion for his own, I love this job. I thought it was the basic. So I'm going to end this. Yeah, I'm in this. All right. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through Patreon. Fucking 10 minutes. That's awesome. My sense of time at this point was not necessarily that bad off. My thought was keep it to a specific thing and don't necessarily go beyond the bounds. So, Corey Baker, don't go Jamal. If there will be, there will be more leverage for workers. Agreed. If we had UBI, there will be more leverage for workers. Agreed. UBI, federal jobs guarantee. Yeah, agreed. Look, the point is, I'm trying to get at is freedom is something else. You're being compelled and pushed along by your needs. This is somewhat of an anonymous push, almost an anonymous violence. There is no reason a society should allow anybody in that society to go without food, without shelter, without... Look, what we look at our society and we say, oh God, we're free because we could choose Pepsi or Coke. But every day you go to a job where you are essentially in a totalitarian system, being told what to do, what to make, how long to stay, and for all intents and purposes, what you're going to be paid. The distribution of power here is always in the perspective of the boss, not necessarily the worker. There may be a few people in your society who may get to choose their jobs and everything else, but those people are few and far between. The majority of jobs are low to minimum wage, low wage jobs. Why? Like, if this is really is a democratic process in a democratic country, why are we subjecting ourselves to totalitarian systems the majority of the day? This is kind of what I'm getting at. There is no reason why workers themselves can't run their own companies. Meaning the CEO is somewhat irrelevant in the company. Ultimately, you just need the capacity of people to be able to democratically elect the people who run the company, how the company operates. The CEO is unnecessary. At one point in England, they used to believe that the king and queen was necessary. I mean, after all, they were appointed by God. How else can you do it? There are other ways to do it. And subjecting yourself to this kind of rule of a small minority is fucking debasing. Whether you... I understand the line that people get, that they accept themselves. Like, this is freedom, this is liberty, this is whatever. Working 8-9 hours a day is not the same thing as freedom and liberty. And this is not me saying that people shouldn't work. Yes, people should work. But I would prefer people to work doing things that they want to do, not necessarily doing things that they're forced to do. And a society should be able to get together and make a decision on how to arrange yourself in a way where that's more true. I mean, fuck, man. Why do we allow this? I guess that's all. Yeah, it's not something we should allow. Yeah, shit jobs. Just shit jobs. And by the way, making this argument about unions. Unions are nice, but unions still create the contradiction between boss versus worker. I'm saying eliminate the contradiction. Get rid of the boss. The workers themselves can run the company. The workers are really the only component that you need, per se. Again, depending on how you organize your society, how you allocate resources in the society itself. And this is not me even saying get rid of capitalism. So I'm just saying, even within the confines of the capitalistic system, having workers owning the means of production, you're still functioning in a system of markets. It may look like something else, but it's still, to some degree, a capitalistic system. But I'll end it here. I'm not going to keep it long, because at this point I'll prattle on and we'll be here for 3 hours. So, alright guys. Enjoy the content. Please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the Patreon. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye. Where's my mouse?